All righty. I'm going to remind everybody to keep yourself muted during the recording. If you have any questions, put them up in the chat and we'll be able to ask them as they come up. So welcome everybody to Greatest Hits episode 5. Today we're going to have the interviewer be the interviewee. We're going to be talking to John Drake. Master John Drake has been fencing since he was about 14, and he's a 3-time Queen's Champion winner. He's been traveling all across the United States, fighting anyone he can find, and he's made some really good benefits to the FCA. Would you like to kind of brag about yourself a little bit?
Yeah. Like Rowan said, I've been fencing since I was 14. So I started in 2007. And pretty much from the moment I did it, I was like, oh yeah, I like this and I want to make this like my thing and I want to be the best at it. This is always my goal from very, very early on. It's very ambitious. So people told me they told me like the white scarf was the highest level award you could get for rapier at the time, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna get that. And they said Queen's Champion in Onstura was like the most prestigious tournament, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna win that at some point. And I started in the youth. Actually, I started in the youth field, and so the first thing I wanted to do was win the youth tournament, which is called Guardian of the Queen's Hope. And it took me a few times, a few tries, partially because my brother was very good also, so he beat me a couple times for that. But yeah, have a lot of fun. I've had good success with students that have been pretty successful also, I think. And yeah, traveled all over the place, like Rowan said. So excited to share some of my fights with y'all.
Yeah, I imagine it's nice to be able to talk about your style and your viewpoints after interviewing so many people.
Oh, definitely. To give my opinion on things.
Yeah, right. So just listening to other people's opinions. So you mentioned Queen's Hope, but what are some tournaments that you really were proud of over the years?
Yeah, so I did eventually win Queen's Hope, and I was very proud about that at the time. And then the 3 Queen's Champions I've won here in Onstura were all big deals. And in Onstura, like we have, a relationship with the Queen that you win for, and so that was really awesome. But from like a purely fighting perspective, probably the Onstura tournament at Pennsic was my proudest win. Because I think it was the first Onstura to win that tournament, and like it had been like since the 90s, the last one, and it had been Duke Miguel who'd won it before, and so it was a long drought of no Onsturans winning our own tournament at Pennsic. And then I beat Master Toritaka in the finals of that tournament, and I think he's one of the best fighters in the SCA, so I was very proud of that. So it's probably my favorite tournament win from a pure fighting perspective. That and then the 3 Queen's Champions in Onstura, I think.
Yeah. You thinking about racking up more Queen's Champions if you can?
I mean, over time, it's just a lot of standing in court, so we'll take that as slowly, maybe.
I think Miguel did it over years and years, so
yeah, it gets hard on the feet.
You got time. All right, you want to hop into some? Oh yeah, you need like nurse shoes or something.
Yeah, I can. I'll go ahead.
You ready to get into some video?
Yeah, let me start the recording real quick, or the screen sharing.
So John will be screen sharing and controlling the video.
Is that showed up for everyone?
So this video, yeah, it's up for me. Should be good for everyone. All right. So here, John's was the Tournament of Champions against Ingrid. Can you go ahead and play it?
Mm-hmm. Maybe. Oh, here we go.
Let's see, are we lagging a bit on your side?
Is it?
I'm getting a bit of a lag, but from what I can see, is this a good example of your basic style, like right foot forward, right hand way back, dagger forward?
I'll stop it here for a second to talk about that. So my stance, I keep my sword hand, especially when, sword and dagger is my favorite style, and I prefer to fight that. And I usually keep my hand pretty far back, kind of in front of my hip, like you see here. And the idea of that is that it means my opponent can't reach out and touch my sword as easily. So like they have to bring themselves into my range to cover my line. And so that gives me a time to protect it. And especially here in Onsura, we have a lot of really good sword and dagger fighters. And so if you let your sword kind of hang out too far out, someone will just parry it and kill you. And so I like to have it back. And then it means when I throw my shot, I can also change my timing as I go. So I can like start fast and slow it down, or vice versa. Versus if my hand was already extended, it kind of was already be showing that to my opponent. Like I would have showed my range, and they could mess with my blade. And then keep my dagger as far forward as I can without, like with a little bit of a bend in the elbow so that it's relaxed, so that I have the most time possible to intercept my opponent's blade. And I usually, my ideal is to use the dagger first as the defense and the sword as the secondary defense. I mean, you can kind of blend them together, but my idea is that if I can parry with my dagger, my sword is super free to throw back. So
Makes sense.
versus you can parry and throw back at the same time with your sword, but it's a lot harder to do than a lot of people say. So I like,
Yeah,
like,
definitely. Like, taking the line is a lot more than just a word.
yeah. So I
So
way more prefer to use the dagger to control the line. And I actually think that if you look at it, most of the really good fighters in the SCA do it this way, just some version. I think this is actually the more common way to do it. That is the most effective because it's a little easier.
yeah, probably easier to train up and everything.
Yeah, and then I try to keep my feet a little long here, but try to keep my feet under me, knees bent, so I can go backwards or forward, weight evenly spread between both feet.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of generally how I like to stand and do my fighting.
I think some people have described that as a runner stance, where that back heel is lifted a bit.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. I do keep my I like to keep my heel up a little, and I like to keep my back toe usually pointed kind of towards my opponent rather than teed.
Yeah.
And I feel like that gives me, I can push, when I lunge, I push off with the ball and toe of my front foot, or my back foot, sorry, my left foot. And so I get all the power from my lunge through that foot. And so it's kind of like the heel is kind of irrelevant to being down or not, because I'm using the foot and through the leg to generate the power for the lunge. So like I think someone described it once as, even if my heel is down, you should have your weight on the balls of your feet so that you could slide a piece of paper under your heels. It's like you really don't want your heels down very much, like on your toes.
Not rocking back onto the back of your leg.
Yeah. I mean, there's people say you have someone on their heels, meaning like you have them off guard, right? So
yeah, it's typically a bad thing, right?
yes. I'll go ahead and
feel free to go ahead and play.
Yeah. Yeah. So in this fight, I was trying to see if I could get, because Ingrid's blade is kind of like she's sticking out here a little bit far, and so I was trying to see if I could cover that with my dagger and then throw in. Her hand is still pretty far back though.
Right.
Seems that I don't think that quite. I don't remember if there was a kill there or not.
So we could do a slow-mo on this one.
Yeah, let me go back and slow-mo that. Whoops, that's the wrong button. I think it was here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it looks like I throw center, and you see, yeah, so this is kind of my ideal, right? I'm covering with my dagger, and reaching out with my sword. My foot turns in a little here, which is bad. Probably shortens my lunge a little bit, and then she kind of gets out of my dagger a little, but my dagger is still in front of me. This is another big pet peeve of mine, as I didn't let my dagger go behind me, right? So I kept it in front, and so I was able to still get that second parry. So it was parry one, and then I got a second parry. But if I'd let my dagger go back, like a lot of people will do that and they lunge. And I worked really, really hard not to let my dagger hand go back as I was throwing a long lunge, right? Because
kind of lose all your
I didn't want to do it. Like I saw other people making that mistake, and I was like, I don't want to be those people.
This is a tournament at home, so you probably already knew her, but in general, do you like to have information about your opponent before you hop into a tournament with them?
Yes, I like to know as much as possible about my opponent. If that's spending a ton of time on YouTube, finding videos of them fighting, having previous experience from how fought them before. If I've never fought them, I'll try to find someone who knows at least a little bit about them and ask them about it. And it just helps me. It helps me not get as nervous before the fight because I feel like the unknown is the most scary thing. So even if I'm going to do the same tactics that I always do, if I know what they're going to do and how they're going to fight, it makes me feel a lot more confident. Like I have a plan. So I like to know as much as possible. Plus, I also just kind of like to geek out about it, and so like it's fun to do the research and to know um, how people fight. Yeah. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how different people fight and
No,
prepare for them.
I take that.
That was
She's
kind
kind
of
of
the same.
dropping her guard in range. Ooh.
Yeah. Okay. I think this land hit the arm, and this is a good example. So little jump, stepped a little high here, but as she threw in, I parried, and you can also see where her dagger is. It's way back here, not doing
Oh no.
anything. And so her parry is late, and I was able to tag her in the arm there. It's convenient that she made that mistake that I was just pointing out earlier.
Yeah, funny how that works out. A lot of people make the mistake though. So.
Yeah, it's a counterbalance, right? Like when we lunge, you want to try to keep that counterbalance, and it's how they lunge, in a lot of manuals with single sword and modern fencing. When you have a dagger, your dagger's too useful to throw it behind you, right? In single, it might not matter as much,
Yeah,
but
that makes sense.
I think it'll show this kill in slow-mo here in a second. I think the marshal was upset at himself because he used my brother's name instead of my name when he announced who won. Yeah. So this is pretty classic my style of fencing right here. I gain the blade with my dagger with the one lunge, and then I redouble and hit
Yeah.
center line, right? It's
It looks
easy
like
when
your dagger stays out in front.
it's easy when because she doesn't have a dagger, so it's hard for her to
And on her
defend
blade.
this. But that was pretty much classic, like what I usually. Ideally, that's what I would do most of my fights. Sometimes it doesn't always work out that way, but.
I mean, you already talked about your sword and your secondary weapon. What is your thought process around your style and what you teach other people?
So my philosophy kind of how to approach fencing in general, or. I think you froze, Rowan. Okay, well, I think Rowan might have frozen, so I'm just gonna talk here for a second, I guess. I think this is a double kill here. I can't quite remember, but because like I hit her here, yeah, and then she hits me here, and it's because my dagger was too wide. So I left my dagger back. Not as bad as I was talking about, but it was still enough that left this opening here. So I should have been more solid with my defense. So it was a double kill. Are you back, Rowan? No. Okay. Well, wait.
Sorry
Are
about
you
that.
back?
Yep.
Are you back?
I'm way back.
Okay. Yeah, you were frozen for a
God
while.
damn it. Yeah, I fucking Zoom crashed.
No worries. So ask the last question you asked, and we'll get back to it.
You got it. So you already talked about how your sword and your dagger relate to each other. Your dagger is up front. It's kind of being your main defense. But how would you sort of describe your fencing style and how you teach other people?
Mm-hmm. So like for me personally, like I approach it, like I tend to be an aggressive fighter, so I want to usually want to create the opening that happens. But I want to hit my opponent. But to hit my opponent, I have to to win the fight, I have to not get hit, right? And their sword is what makes me lose. So like people will say like they're like the first rule of fencing is don't die, or the first rule of fencing is, and they'll say like the second rule is pointing and goes in the other guy or something, or they mix those up, right? For me, the first rule of fencing is kill your opponent, don't die. And I think of it as one rule. And I put it in that order specifically because I think if you've entered into a field with someone and the idea is that one of you is you're fighting to the death, you have to kill your opponent eventually or they will kill you. There's a threat in front of you. You have to eliminate that threat. But you have to do it so in such a way that you do not also get hit while doing so, right? In our context, get hit or die if it was a real fight. So I look at it of how, like if I was just gonna lunge and hit someone, I'll look and say, okay, I gotta cover their sword with my dagger, usually preferably my dagger, and I will cover and hit them. Or if they throw at me, I'll cover and throw back, or I'll fake at them, they disengage, I hit them while they're disengaging. But I have to make sure that their sword is occupied in some way while I'm striking them. Or otherwise it's just random and I'm just gambling, and we don't like, I think Tora said it last week, it's like you don't like to be lucky, you want to be good.
Yeah.
And so I try to
just risk everything.
Yeah, I try to reinforce that when I'm teaching too. It's like if you don't want your moves to just count on luck, you want them to be repeatable by yourself and preferably other people, and be tested against in tournaments and in pickups and like all over the place, right? So that's why you got to fight a lot to make sure what you're doing works and you're doing it right and you're testing it. I'll just let the video play a little more.
I was going to hop on to the next video, but I got to pull up my list again.
Yeah, we'll talk about they'll show the kill here in slow-mo again. We'll go over it real quick.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So Ingrid kind of fakes at my dagger and then pulls back and then throws against center. Because my dagger was still in front of me, I was able to do a cross parry after I hit her, I think, center line. So it's a little hard to tell.
Nice.
Which one did you want to watch next?
I'm still trying to pull up my list. Let's see, Austrian rapier attorney at Benzik. Okay. Is that the 2017? Yeah.
Yeah. Skip.
Look, it's death.
Did you want to watch just the finals or my other fight in this video?
Let's watch your other fight first, if you don't mind.
Yeah. There's actually some interesting stuff here.
Absolutely. And this is like, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is top of your game. Basically, as hard as you can fight.
I feel like right at this tournament and like the few months after this tournament were I was in my best shape, like fighting wise. Like felt like I had hit a new level, felt comfortable in tournaments. I had adjusted some of my style a little bit. Like my dagger is a little bit, like I'm holding it a little differently. The point is a little higher than the hand. And it's a little bit of an adjustment. It helps me keep the base of the dagger more in front of my opponent's blade rather than before I was usually kind of putting the tip in front. And I find that made my parries a little bit easier because you want to parry with it's like the ricasso, or not the ricasso, the forte of your dagger, right? The strong part of your dagger is it's not as important as the sword. But I found that if I kept the point up a little bit, and this isn't the best example of this, but I felt like I could keep that part of my dagger that I wanted to defend with in front of their blade a little more easily. So it was a little bit of an adjustment I made.
It's like blocking their sword almost like it's a tiny buckler.
Yeah, so like here's a better example. Right? The point is a little higher than his point, and so his point of, if it's just straight, it's lined up more with the middle of the blade rather than the point of the blade. And,
yeah, absolutely.
And that made it easier to guide him into the quillins and the guard. So that was a slight adjustment I made. It's a pretty small adjustment, really, but I felt like it helped my fighting a decent amount. Some of it was also just I felt more comfortable in the fights. Like I think I got a little more confident or something. And this last 6 months before this, I figured something out mentally. Not quite sure what, but.
As part of that, do you do anything to prep before a tournament to get ready, to get your mindset in the right spot?
I do a lot of things. So like I visualize a ton, especially so like if I was gonna fight. So like let's take this tournament as an example. I knew that I was gonna have to fight Toritaka in this tournament, and he was the fighter I was most worried about fighting. And so I visualized fighting him a lot and trying to figure out, had ideas of how to fight him, what I thought he was going to do. So, and I think that does two things. One, there's studies that show that visualization is almost as good as actually physically practicing a skill. And then the other thing is it made me less nervous because when I actually came out and actually fought the fight for real, I had already done it maybe hundreds of times in my head, and so it wasn't a big deal to do it for real for once. And so I'll generally do that, and I'll kind of think about usually who are the opponents that I'm most concerned about fighting, and visualize fighting them. And then I do a lot of just general visualization of like being at the tournament and trying to like make myself more feel confident. And then I do a ton of like obviously practice, right? So like tons of sparring, point control drills, footwork drills, so like lunges, advanced retreats, just drilling those just for conditioning. So working on like being faster, and keeping balance, accuracy for point control drills, and then just a lot of sparring. And I like to get, if I can, I want to get sparring as high level opponents. So I feel like I'm pushing myself as hard as I can leading up to a big tournament. Sometimes that's difficult depending on like who's available to practice with leading up to a tournament. But so I had done like, I had done a ton of practicing before this tournament. I specifically with my brother, and a ton of visualization, some with my or at the time, my cadet Miles. We practiced a bunch just to try to get ready. And then, like this was like the middle of the week at Penzik. So I obviously tried to get some practice at Penzik by doing pickups, and
Yeah.
some of the other tournaments. I kind of used those. I wanted to win this tournament specifically. So I kind of used the other tournament to sort of prep for this tournament.
Yeah, the other tournaments are just practice.
Yeah, and that kind of depends on your goals. For my goals for a war, like if there's one tournament I really want to win, then I might use the other tournaments as practice. Maybe I decided I was like, well, I just want to do well in all the tournaments. So, but yeah, yeah. If you can mute yourself, if you have a question, you can put it in the chat.
Yep.
I did want to highlight something on this kill here though against Raphael.
Yeah.
His blade, he's fighting Capoferro or Gigante, I'm not quite sure, a later Italian period style. And so his sword is way more extended. He's trying to control the line with his sword. But because of this, it makes it very easy for me to manipulate his sword with my dagger. And so I kind of bait the center line a little bit by leaving my dagger a little wide. And then
stepping
I lunge in, I cross parry, and hit him down the center. And if he had his blade back here like I do, and both styles are valuable, but if his blade was farther back, I could not have done this technique the same way I did, because his blade would not have been available for me to create the opening with my dagger. And because he's trying to cover the line, he's bringing his hand across his body to his inside, so his sword is already pointed at my sword shoulder. So it makes the cross parry across my body really easy, because I only need to move him like 4 inches to my right, his left. So like his point is already kind of
started it for you.
Yeah, and so I can just kind of move him over here. So it's really easy. That's kind of one of my go-tos against people who keep their blade super extended. And this is a 2 out of 3, and you can actually see I do the little show here. I do the same thing in the second fight.
Nice. Excellent. There's one question in the chat that does your strategy change against other offhand combinations like 2 swords or anything like that?
So really only if it's 2 swords. Everything else, the important thing is there's one line, right? Like the line of the sword creates is the thing that I'm worried about is going to kill me. So if they have a buckler, case, or sorry, if they have buckler, cloak, cane, whatever, they still only have one sword, and that's the only thing that can kill me, so I'm not too worried about it. Case, there's 2 lines. So that changes the strategy a little bit, and it makes it really a pain in the ass to deal with, honestly. But so some things I'll try for that is I'll try to see if they commit one hand and like so a lot of times people will leave their other sword behind them. They'll commit with one hand too hard, and I'll take advantage of that. I'll try to snipe their hands a little bit more because it'll take away their second sword and then change the tactics. I'll go for their feet a little bit more because sometimes I feel like there's so much there's two weapons like in front of their torso, assuming they're both holding this two swords high. So if I can just go for their legs, it kind of like gets underneath that plane of fighting. So yeah, but really it's only case changes my tactics a ton. And if they have a defensive secondary, I kind of keep in my back pocket that I could close for dagger, kill them with a dagger, but that's usually not I think that's still risky because you have to make such a big make a big action with your main sword to cover. And so I usually don't. I like if we get to that range, I'll take it. It's not usually my opening strategy. So yeah, really only case changes my tactics as far as different hands or a different
That makes sense.
secondaries. Yeah, and you can see here in a second that this was basically the same.
It's the same setup. It's the same. Nasty. Very mean.
Yeah. This one, he kind of makes a circle parry down. I don't even really need to parry him that much. He kind of does the parry for me a little bit. But
so when you were interviewing Aaron Harper as one of your greatest hits episodes, he talked some about timing, maneuvering the fight, but then he also talked about sword work itself. How do you think about sword work? Yours is very unusual when it comes to you don't typically take the line in the same way as others. So do you want to talk some about that?
I jokingly said the other day that people parry with their sword when their dagger's not good enough. So maybe that answers the question. But the truth is that my blade mechanics are my weakest part of my game, and it's totally a fair criticism to have of me. But I think if we're fighting, most SCA tournaments let you bring whatever weapon combination you want. So as long as I get to have my dagger, I think that my sword mechanics are good enough when supported by my dagger. Like, and I'll admit I'm the first person to say that single is not my best style, because I think the dagger makes it. I just think that sword and dagger, there's a lot you can be more creative with the fight. I think it flows better. It mitigates some physical advantages that people have. Like it's easier for a shorter fighter to win a sword and dagger fight than win a single sword fight, because you have the dagger to control the space to cut close. It's just not as easy to do it with single. And I know all the single purists are going to talk about the line and all that stuff, and they're not wrong. It's just a lot harder to do than they say. And with the dagger, it's a lot easier to do. It's probably not as easy to do as I say also. I've been accused of that, of saying that it's easy. Why don't they just cover the line with their dagger and kill them? And someone has told me, it's like, well, most people,
and not everyone experiences
harder.
The same way.
Yeah, it's harder to do than you're saying, John. But I still think it is a lot easier to do with a dagger than a single sword. So I think single is actually one of the hardest styles we have. And physical advantages are more of a factor in it. And I mean, that doesn't mean you should make those as an excuse, but because the SCA,
you prep for it differently.
Yeah, you prep for it differently, and because the SCA usually allows you to bring a secondary, you should learn how to use a secondary. Like that's how people win tournaments in the SCA. Is if you can be passable with single, and then pick a secondary and be good at that. Dagger is probably the best, but buckler can work too. I interviewed Dominic, and he does stick,
cane,
stick, cane, whatever. Cloak is a rare one, but there's examples of people being successful with that as well. But you don't see as many people winning big tournaments with single because their opponent can bring, as long as their opponent can bring a secondary, right? So
yeah, if it's all single, it's a little bit better. But
yeah, if it's a single sword tournament, that's different. It's different. And I have won a couple of those, even though I would not say that as my favorite style. Anyway.
Yeah, feel free to hit the play on this video. So this is the video we were talking about earlier. That is your fight that you're the most proud of.
Yeah, so I think Tora is one of the best fighters, if not the best fighter in the SCA. And I had his number today, that day, because he's beaten me more than I've
Hell
beaten
yeah.
him. But so I've watched this fight a bunch of times, if I'm being honest, and so I know. So this one, the first point. Actually, I'm going to rewind this a little bit because I have a point to make here earlier on. So they call Leon, right? Actually, I didn't go back far enough. Sorry. So they call Leon. So I step forward a little bit and kind of test the range. And I feel like he didn't give me the reaction I was expecting. I thought he would adjust. And so because he didn't adjust,
Not at all.
I just lunge. And because I keep my dagger in front of me, so his point is literally right next to my face because my dagger's covered it. And I have a good extension here. It's hard to see. It's a little bit weird, but I've kept both my hands in front of me and I've extended and I've profiled my body, but still kept my dagger defense, right? So
absolutely.
And I'll show it again here at slow-mo in a second.
And the next step after that is that you retreat on an off angle. You don't retreat straight back.
Yeah, so he gives me for
your
that
whole body kind of tips to the right.
Yeah, he gives me the range. I extend in and I cover with my dagger. Yeah, and then I step off at an off angle. So this is a little bit of a secret here that I'm gonna admit. This is somewhat of an overextension and I'm disguising it as an off angle retreat. So
nice. You're falling. I get it.
So yes, I'm falling to my right and I catch myself and I say, oh, look, I retreated on an off angle, which is a good thing to do, right? I didn't leave on the same angle I came in on, which is a good thing to do. But the truth is, it's sort of a byproduct of having such lunging so far that it's hard to recover straight back. So
totally. If you let your whole body fall to the right, then you'll go off on an off angle. It's great.
Yeah, so you can go farther and you'll be safe. So it's kind of a win-win. But there's a little bit like behind
the scenes.
It was all planned out.
Bit.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. This is my planned fall, my trust fall. I feel free to keep going. You got into it a little bit, but I'd love to hear more about how you prepped for this fight. Like you did visualizations. If I'm remembering correctly, you even had Mike pretend to be Tora.
I definitely tried my brother Miguel, Mike. I definitely did have him try to pretend to be Tora. He is not very good at pretending to mimic other fighters, so it's kind of more frustrating because I kept stopping to tell him that that's not how Tora would fight. He did do it differently, but but that's something that
maybe
I think that's something that I'm particularly good at is. Like I said, I like to have a lot of information about fighters, and so I have a good memory for that, and so I know how someone's going to fight, and so I can actually do a pretty good job of mimicking someone's fight. And so when someone else is doing it, I'm like, well, no, that's wrong, so I stop them. But yeah, we did try that a little bit. I definitely had Mike at least fight, so the Tigers fight drop point, right? Their point is down in a low guard, is what they call it, and so that was something that I wanted to prep for. So I definitely had my brother Mike fight with his point down, if nothing else, right? So he didn't fight exactly like Tora, but just having the point down by his knee or down by the ground changed the dynamic, and that's harder because, like I was saying earlier, that I liked to be able to reach out and control the blade with my dagger. Well, when the blade's down here, you can't do that because you would have to reach too far to get it. It's the same reason he's doing it for the same reason I hold my sword back by my hip to keep people from messing with it. He's just holding it with the point down. It's the same reason to do it. I mean, there's a lot of advantage to kind of holding the blade out of space because they can't control it to close that distance. So that makes the fight very hard. Tora is very fast and he's taller than me. So I thought a lot about how I didn't want to just stand. If I just stood and traded blows with him, he would beat me because of his range and his speed and his precision, right? So I was like, that's a losing proposition. Though usually I like that. Usually I can trade blows with someone. I didn't think that if I traded blows with Tora at the range he wanted, it was going to go well for me at all. And so I was like, no, can't do that. So I was trying to, and you can kind of see him play this fight. So you can see how I'm not standing still, right? Because I don't want him. Because if I stand still, he'll just hit me in the face. Like, he's very good at that shot, or he'll do a little up down fake, get my dagger out of position, hit me in the face. And so I'm trying to not let him set that up. So I'm trying to either throw at him and move, or move and throw, just not let him settle where he's comfortable. And we double here. Which he kind of missed. We both misjudged the range here. We're both way closer than I think we wanted. You can see it right here. Is the slow-mo? Yeah, right here. Suddenly we're both like, oh, way too close. And so that's why both of these shots land.
That makes sense.
So there's definitely make a mistake on both our parts. Luckily, we both we both made the same mistake at the same time.
Yeah. So you get another chance. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, 2 out of 3. So
yeah, it's like, yeah, I guess you're both adjusting back and forth, and then see a little gap and launch into it. It reminds me a bit of when you're fighting somebody who's doing your own style. I mean, it's higher caliber right now, but because you can't get his blade out of the way, it looks like just a different flavor of your style.
Yeah, I mean, like you kind of come at the same ideas from different directions, right? But we're both, if you look at this, our blades are refused where we can't touch it, and our daggers are forward, being our main defense. And his dagger's in front of my sword, and my dagger. So I don't want to go too far down because that leaves high open. But my dagger's in front of his sword. So it's the same idea. We're just in different configurations of the same idea. I think it's a good point. You can see here, I'm just not being static. This is also kind of, I developed this a little bit too over this year in 2017. I stopped being a little as static in my fights. I started being more mobile and trying to create opportunities from motion rather than being still into motion. Which is something I still use to this day. It's just, it's been taking long. It's also a lot more tiring to fight this way because you're having to move more.
Yeah. But what are some of the benefits of doing that? Like, why do you do it?
So I'm just going to be honest. I watched Duke Branos from the Mid-Realm teach a bunch of classes about this on YouTube, and he talks about tension and motion and you know, and it's for heavy fighters, and he got a lot of inspiration from boxing, but it really applies to any type of fighting. So I'll be honest, I would just go watch him. I think he explains it way better than me, and I just stole straight from him. So in this case against Tora, it didn't. It didn't. Yeah, Duke Branos. He has a ton of videos on YouTube. Just Google it, SCA Duke Branos on YouTube, and watch everything he has because it's all super useful for whatever type of fighting you're doing. You'll find it'll be useful. And I had watched a bunch of his videos. The other thing he let me do is because I used to feel like if I wasn't doing something, I would feel like I was being too passive and I would get impatient. And so I figured out how to be patient without being like hasty. And so a lot of this movement, I'm trying to look for the opportunities I want, but I'm not forcing them, kind of letting the fight flow a little better. And this took me like 10 years, like, because I've been fighting for 10 years at this point in this video. And it basically took me like 10 years to learn to not be impatient. So, because definitely my weakness was impatience. And so it just kind of creates more opportunities. And I think a lot of people hear that though, and they just start like hopping all over the field with no purpose. You have to move with a purpose. So against Tora, I was trying to not let him set up his headshot. That's what I was trying to deny him. And so there was a purpose behind it. And I was trying to look for the range I wanted. So that's kind of what the benefit was. It was kind of a long, rambling answer to a simple question, but
I think it's a good answer. It's a full answer.
Yeah. So
it looks like people get bouncy and then very still, and then they start to add in a little bit more motion.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
As far as their general
progression, I would agree with that. So we'll see this shot in slow-mo here in a second. And I think this is, maybe one of the best shots I've ever thrown in a tournament. It was, so yeah, he steps in and lunges, and I parry with my sword or my dagger and my sword, and I step offline. So I'm sort of triple safe.
Oh,
One of
look
my
at
first
that.
fencing teachers used to call it belt and suspenders when you had two types of defense. So like a parry and avoid at the same time or something was belt and suspenders. So I guess this is like belt and suspenders and a second belt or something.
Safety pin. Like, I don't know.
A pointed doublet.
Yeah, there you
So
go.
yeah, so I just got his timing. He threw into my parry and I stepped offline and hit him in the center line. So this is what I was kind of looking for like the last minute of this fight, was trying to just get something like this. And I got the parry and
Yeah.
landed the shot. So and the other fun thing about this, this shot had been hitting my brother in practice like the week before, the Tuesday before we left for Penzic. I'd been hitting with something very similar. It wasn't quite as pretty as this one, but it was a parry step off line throwing center. And so it was a shot that I had apparently was just, for me, sometimes there's certain techniques that just kind of feel like they work for you for a few weeks and then they kind of rotate out of my rotation and another technique will kind of rotate back in. And this one,
Mhm.
for whatever reason, just seemed to be working for me for that like few weeks right around this time. So
It's a good, it looks like a puzzle piece going together. It looks really good. I like it.
what do you want to go to next?
I gotta get my chat window out of my way.
Was there another question in the chat too? I thought I might have seen.
And there's no more questions in the chat at this time.
Okay.
If people have any questions, add them in. I'm actually so the Free Scholar tournament, you and Torse.
Mhm.
It's a good example of fighting a really good left-handed person. Might add into the question a little bit. So you obviously know Torse, but
yeah, Master Torres. I don't think he was a mod at the time, but now Master Torres from Atlantia is a pretty good friend of mine. I've known him for a long time. We go back and forth, kind of trading tournament wins at wars. But one of the better lefties in the SCA, in my opinion, on the Rapier field. So yeah, fighting a lefty, I tend to just kind of like do all the same stuff. I just kind of scoot over my guard so I guess in the case against the left, you're actually scooting it to your right to line up with his sword more. So if his point is here, so I'm kind of keeping my dagger a little more to that side, just trying to block off his angle of attack, right? Yeah, I can see. So my kind of keeping my blade down, and my dagger's kind of almost like right in front of my face now. Maybe hard to tell the angle though. He just picks my dagger hand there, so it kind of doesn't. Yeah. And now you can see why my single sword is so bad.
damn.
He also just takes advantage of the fact that I don't have a second weapon, and so he just sweeps, covers my blade, and closes up and throws. Yeah. So I think I might have hit him in the leg there at the very end, but it doesn't matter.
Not if you're already dead.
Yep. So it was very nice by him. I think a lot of people get too freaked out by lefties. Like you have to adjust a little bit, but you got to remember that everything they can do to you, you can do back to them. The fight is literally a mirror. It's just that they have more experience at it than you. That's the only advantage they have.
Yeah, they've been doing it.
Yeah, this is their normal fight, and you're fighting this, whatever, a fifth of the time or something, less, a tenth of the time. I can't remember how many lefties there are in the world. Sorry, go ahead.
But through all this, like you have a very clear system. All of your fights look pretty similar to each other. How important do you think it is for other people to have a system to work from?
I think it is the most important thing. Because I was talking earlier about randomness, right? So a system keeps things from being random. It's a way to replicate. Can you replicate the same fight? And it kind of gives you. It's a tool chest, being a little rambly, it's a tool chest to solve a problem, right? So if a fight's a puzzle, so if someone throws a shot at you with your sword, with the sword, how do you defend it? Your system should inform that decision, right? So my system is, if someone throws a shot at me, I'll parry with my dagger and throw back at them with my sword. If they disengage my dagger, I'll parry with my sword afterwards. Like so I have like it's a system, right? It's a sort of a checklist. It's like if this worked, that's first. If that didn't work, this, you know.
Yeah. You have
And so
somewhere to
like,
go kind of automatically.
yeah. I also know that like I have range too. So it's like if they throw a shot, maybe I step back and try to parry with my dagger. Or maybe I parry and step in, depending on how well I read the attack. But if I feel like my hand has gone in the wrong place, I'll usually sword parry and retreat, and that's part of my system. And so you have to have it. And most good, and not most, all good successful fencers have a system, whether it's a system that they have created themselves or a system that is a period system. It's based on a period manual, Capoferro, what have you there, or it's a system that someone else developed in the essay that they are taught. So like the Black Tigers is a system. It's a very good system, but it's not based on a period manual, though mostly you can document most successful fencing in the SCA can be documentable, even if that wasn't their intention, right? Because there's only so many ways to be successful with a sword, right? And so like the body only works so many ways. So
And sword's always the same.
Yeah, so my system, I've been somewhat informed by period fencing, but a lot of it was just figured out and stolen from people I saw fence. Like I saw that person is like, oh, I like what they do there. I'm gonna do that more. I like what that person does. I'm gonna do that more. And then I kind of created it more systematically. But I can pretty much document most of the techniques I use in some fencing manual. It's not always the same one, but they mostly are all documentable. And so and then I've been able to teach my system to other people, my students, like Rowan here, or my first cadet, or my other cadet, Miles. Rowan is my first cadet, and then I have another cadet, Leandra, and they all fight. And even my brother, who fights very different than me, but he fights from the same system. He just has a different. And I usually use the word style. So like you have a style, which is kind of your own flavor, but the system is the same. So there's like two people might fight Capoferro, but they might fight kind of differently. It's because they have a different kind of style or take on the system. And then I think regionally, so like an Onstjorn fighting Capoferro is going to fight a little different than an Atlantean fighting Capoferro. Is like an Eastern, someone from the East going to fight Capoferro because they have the sort of the background of their kingdom's fighting culture.
That can't not affect you.
Yeah, it's like it's the meta. It has to be successful against
the flavoring around where you live in.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally. Do you recommend anybody combining systems, combining styles, anything like that?
You can, but it has to be done very, very carefully because like some stuff doesn't make sense to work together, right? Like it has to be, you have to have it, you have to be pretty, you have to think out your system. And honestly, especially when you're newer to intermediate, it is probably just better to learn someone else's system. Just because they will have, whether it's a period system or an SCA, it's someone's system, someone invented in the SCA, just because they'll have run into all the pitfalls that you might, and so they're just going to help you they're going to help you not make the same mistakes that they made, or you're going to make them less often. Because you're be like, oh yeah, this is what happens when like this is the weakness or this situation, right? And so they can help kind of smooth that over. And even if don't have someone to work with, like you don't have anyone that you want to learn from in your local area, if you're fighting a system that is already, so like you pick a period manual, at least you can then the questions you ask people, like maybe you go online and you ask someone a question on Facebook or something, they'll be able to more easily answer those questions if they know what you're trying to do than if you're just like making it up from scratch. So I kind of think that needs to be an advanced, an upper intermediate advanced thing, because there's plenty of good systems out there, and there's tons of overlap between the systems too, because like I said, there's only so many ways to fence correctly or fence well. There's a lot of ways to do it right, but there's even more ways to do it wrong.
Yeah. That makes sense. Well said. For the next video, can we hop over to the first one in this playlist, Gwen 3?
Do you want to watch the rest of this fight? It's almost over.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. I'm trying to cue it because you don't have control.
No, makes sense.
Of course.
Yeah, so I'm being a lot more static in this fight, in that maybe like Taurus is not as tall as Tora, and so it may be that I'm just a little more comfortable. It also could just be that I'm being sloppy and tired or something.
Was this later in the same day?
No, this is the next year.
Oh, okay. My bad. Yeah, 2018.
Yeah, so here's classic. I cover his blade with my blade, or with my dagger. I kind of whiff a little though, but to avoid me covering it, he points it in the air. So it can't kill me while it's pointing in the air, right? So essentially,
No.
I still have dealt with the thing. I've dealt with his weapon, right? Like it is not a threat to me at the current moment because of where it is.
That's an interesting way to look at it. Like it sounds like a lot of people try to say you have to be holding it, you have to be in control of it and have it locked.
Yeah, no, not at all. You just have to make sure it's not hitting you. It's like plenty of times I'll say, sometimes I'll look at someone and say, well, from where their sword is, I can hit them before they can hit me, right? Like if their sword's in a weird spot, or their sword is short, like they're a shorter fighter and they're using a short sword. It's like, okay, well, I can just hit them in the head and they can't touch me. But I approach it with that question of how can I hit them without getting hit, right? And if I don't have that in mind, I don't want it to be random. So that has to inform every decision I make while fencing.
Absolutely. Part of the reason I wanted to bring up this video specifically was Brendan is somebody I remember you pulling a lot of your footwork from.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Especially his retreats.
Yeah, we can definitely talk about that. Put it at speed again. Yeah.
So Brendan is the person on the left. John is on the right.
Yeah, with the buckler, Brendan, Master Brendan.
Master Brendan.
Yeah, see when there's a good shot of his retreat.
It's another person who's a buckler fighter, but very advanced. So it's not that you have to have a dagger. It's really not. It's not the style that makes it. But.
No, I think you do need to have a offhand at the highest levels, but it doesn't have to be a dagger. It can be a buckler, or a case, or a stick, or cloak. Dagger's just the most common.
It's the most fun. Makes sense.
I mean, I think it's the best, but there are examples of people like Dom and Brendan who are very, very, very good with not daggers. Trying to look. Okay, I think this was the double kill. We just kind of both step into each other.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately. Are there any particular like fighting styles that aggravate you, and do you have to work at all to like keep your cool, basically, if they're not calling or anything like that?
So I think I do a good job against fighters who don't call their blows, because I always look at what I can control, and I can just keep hitting them again. Right?
Yeah.
The goal is the same. It's their responsibility to call the blow. I can't control whether they call it. I can control whether I hit them, and I can control whether they hit me. So I'm just going to keep doing those things until I win the fight, or they hit me, then I'll call my shot. But if I walked off the field and I'm like, man, that guy didn't call like 3 of my shots, I'm gonna be a little bit more annoyed. But I'll be like, I should have hit him a 4th time.
Yep.
And I should have parried whatever shot he hit me with, right? Like I'm focusing on the things I can control, not the things I can't control. And to quote, I think it was Duke Diedrich, who's from Atlanta, he said, "You hit them until the candy comes out," or "You keep hitting them until the candy comes out."
Dang
it. But it's a good point, because that's the controllable thing. You just keep hitting them. It's their job to call the blow. As far as fights that opponents that styles that I have trouble with, Case fighters, something that hard to fight. Taller fighters who are patient because they can draw me out. And like I mentioned, I was impatient.
Got it. Makes sense.
Even worse if they're lefties, because it's harder to control that angle. It's a little hard to control the line, a little harder against a lefty. I didn't see Brendan do the retreat that we were talking about.
Yeah, sorry about that. I thought he would, but I might have mixed up my videos. Actually, I'm going to throw it into your hands. Is there a particular video you would like to play?
There's a fight in this video that I think is between my brother and me.
Yeah, that's at 15:04.
15.
And the better angle for it's at 16. Yeah. It's a good thing I wrote down those numbers, isn't it?
Yeah, so this here on the left is my brother, Master Miguel. He's a premier mod of Avonstura. And I believe the youngest, he got his mod when he was 19. So I think he's the youngest mod ever elevated. He might still be the youngest mod in the SCA at 25 now. I don't know of anyone younger than that. So we started fencing at the same time. So you can see that we have the same system, but his movements are very different. And so he's still holding his sword a little bit. He holds his sword a little bit more forward than I do because he is better at disengaging than me. So he kind of wants you to try to cover his sword and he'll disengage it. But the idea is basically the same, right? His dagger's forward, his sword's back, footwork similar. He's a little more upright than me, but pretty close to the same, even though I think most of the people who have fenced both of us would not say that we fight very similarly. So this is kind of my way to just demonstrate what I think of as system versus style.
Absolutely.
He's quite a bit taller than me too, so.
Yeah, after being your student and then also trying to spread this style around and teaching other people, Mike being a little bit taller than you makes sense for him to hold his sword out a little bit and to be standing up a little bit. Like, at least from what I've seen, people fighting in this style who are shorter crouch even more so they can explode forward. Like a big part of the style is the explosion.
Well, the thing is a taller fighter, Mike has to go backwards more and I have to go forwards more because most people are trying to close, is a taller fighter, people are trying to close on him to kill him and he wants to keep them far away from him. As a shorter fighter, I wanted to do the closing. So I have to be a little bit more ready to go forward. So like I do more redoubles on my lunge, right? So when I lunge, I bring my back foot with me and I redouble. And Mike does what I usually call a static lunge where his back foot stays planted and he lunges forward because he needs to be able to retreat. He doesn't necessarily need to throw a second lunge because usually if they've defended the first lunge, they're then now coming forward at him, not retreating. And for me, if a lot of times they are retreating after if my first lunge didn't kill them, so I need to be able to pursue. So it's just kind of a slight difference because of the height. Tactical decision making is a little different, but the way we lunge is the same, and the way we're trying to create the openings are similar with our dagger. I think this is where he kills me. Yeah.
You already touched on it a little bit, but would you speak more to what you think the fundamentals of fighting are? Like what's the baseline you have to do this?
So it's like measure and tempo, which everyone answers, right? Which is just range and timing. So it's the distance between you and your opponent, but it's also like the distance like between my dagger and my sword, right? Because that's all the distances are all the measure of that distance and then the time of that distance, right? How long does it take? So like distance and measure are the kind of the same thing too. It's like how long does it take you to cover that distance? How far? So understanding that concept is very crucial. And then I said earlier that my mantra is kill your opponent, don't die. That is the only rule in fencing that you don't ever break. Everything else has a time that you like, because some people say it's like, okay, well, you always keep your sword, always want to keep your sword online. It's like, well, no, not always. Sometimes you keep your sword, you move your sword offline to go disengage, or, Tora fights with his sword pointed down. There's times to break that rule. Some people say, I say you should never fight with your off leg forward. But some people, there are a few exceptions. There are people who are very good who fight with their off leg forward. I think it's not as good, but they still do it and it still works. But killing your opponent and not dying is the only time you don't break. So it is really truly the only fundamental. And then the way you do that is you understand measure and tempo. Those informs the first rule.
Makes sense.
And then have a system, I guess. But I don't know if that's a fundamental. It gets a little foggy. Like, what is the truest fundamental?
What is the system?
Good idea, right? So, I'll keep playing this.
Absolutely. It is crazy that you're fighting the same style, but in totally different ways from each other. I think it's always impressive.
Yeah, and I would say, you fight the same system, but you have your own style too. It's a little closer to how I fight because we're of similar statures, but yeah. So here's kind of what I do. Like, he disengages down, so I cover down with my dagger and throw a high hook over his, and he parries, but he doesn't quite get the rotation enough. And I hit him high on the neck.
Got it. And you covered low.
Fully. Covered low, yeah.
Nice.
I guess another really important thing that I think is, I don't know if this is a fundamental, but it's a commonality between high-level fighters, is they can use both their hands well, so they can defend and throw at the same time, and even defend like a disengage. They can defend a disengage and throw and disengage at the same time. That is if you can do that, you're talking super high end fight, and that's something Mike is super good at, and I think I'm pretty good at. But it is something that all the really good fighters can do to a certain level, and it is a differentiator. It's something that I don't think I have not heard a lot of other people talk about that. But actually, there's actually a good example of this. His point is high, so I try to cover high with my dagger, but he disengages low, and so I cover low, and I throw a similar hook to the first shot over his dagger. So I'm doing 2 actions with my dagger, really just 1 with my sword actually. So it's only really 3, but I have to make 2 parries to cover his blade and throw a disengage. Or a hook, not disengage, I guess.
Hook. But still not a straight shot. None of these are straight shots or straight parries.
But you're not gonna kill. Yeah, you're not gonna kill most good fighters with straight shots. You're gonna have to do something to make it more complicated. Do you want to go to a different?
Yeah.
Let's see. I wanted to watch. Let's watch. Is this the right one? Yeah, let's watch us fight.
Yeah, that's where we hit each other really hard.
Yes.
So another version of 2 same style, same system, different styles.
Yeah.
Is that a good way to break it down? System versus flavor?
Yeah, I try to say system is the same and styles are different. So you and me would have the same system but different style. But I definitely don't. I sometimes use them interchangeably, and I'm not good at sticking to my own vocabulary. But yeah, you can see here that Rowan's sword is way back by her hip, her dagger's forward, feet in the same place. Same thing with me. I would say her dagger's a little too far back, but we're getting nitpicky. But
agreed.
Yeah, and one of the dangers of fighting someone who fights similar to you is you double kill.
Yeah. Actually, I was gonna basically lead into that as far as, do you have issues mirroring? Where if you're fighting somebody who's doing the same style, does this happen often to you? Do you run into this?
I would say, yeah, if I'm fighting someone who fights similar to me, double kills are more common. And it's because you kind of know each other's strengths and weaknesses. So not only this is true for my brother Mike as well, not only do we fight the same system, we've also fought each other a lot of times. So we know kind of know what they're going to do, and so it's harder to. And so it's kind of like it's almost like this is some of the hardest matches I'm going to fight is the people who fight the same school, right? The same system,
Yeah.
because
That familiarity makes it.
yeah. Well, and she knows I've told Rowan every like if they do this, you kill them for it. If you do this, you kill them for it. So she knows what I'm looking for. So she's not letting me get her sword with my dagger because she's holding it back, which is probably the biggest thing that makes it hard. And
Yeah,
she's
I
looking
feel
for
like that's the hardest part for me too.
yeah, she's looking for the same shot. So it's like this is actually this is one of the more frustrating kind of fights to have. It's also the most fun too in a way because it's
Mhm.
you end up with some interesting exchanges because that you would never get with anyone else because you know what the other person's gonna do. But or you sometimes just jump onto each other's swords.
Sometimes you get hurt. That's just how it is. Jesus.
Yeah. All tangled up in the collar too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hurts to watch.
And then there's a second to this one that is here, I think. Yeah, about to. So
Yeah.
you can see that we both adjust a little bit to that first fight where we just kind of jumped at each other.
Yeah, I think we were both fighting impatient, I would imagine. And
Yeah.
I want to ask first, what is the key to your success? How do you feel that you succeeded and been like one of the best fencers, the greatest hit?
I'm gonna start. I think the first thing is just dedication to it. Like I practiced a lot. I've practiced a lot for a long time. Like so I've done I used to do when I first started I could only do one actual in person with other people practice a week, but I would drill every day at home that I didn't. So I like Tuesday night was sparring and sometimes some drills with just at our local practice. And then every other night I was doing drills. And then I got started doing 2 practices a week, and then I would spar twice a week and drill every other day. And then we started doing 3 practices a week and I would drill not every, the drilling has fluctuated more in the more recent years. But when I was like right before like that Penzic that I won the Onsuran tourney, I
Yeah.
was sparring 3 days a week and I was drilling 2 to 3 other days a week on top of that. And it was a lot of like stuff for fitness. So it was like doing a ton of lunges or like fencing lunges or like drilling like advancing retreating with my feet. And so I was working on it was a drill to learn the skill, but it was also conditioning. And I was doing like tons of point controls where I was just like hitting a target a bunch of times, and I was doing what one of my teachers called Don or Master Kelly calls organic point control. So I like put my sword in a weird place and throw from weird angles, and I would just do that a ton. And that kind of later in my fencing career, that kind of like fluctuates. Like if I'm really working towards a tournament, I'll do more drills and more. I mean, I still spar a ton because it's what I like to do, but I'll drill more or less depending on what I'm working towards. But yeah, I think dedication is number one thing, and then I think I'm really good at, and I mentioned this earlier, I'm really good at knowing, at like at remembering how fights work, and so.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll remember how a fighter fights, and so I'll kind of have that knowledge, and that helps. Also, this kind of goes back to dedication, is I also watch a ton of video of myself fighting and of other people.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly trying to improve my own fight, and then I'm trying to learn how other people fight so that I can beat them slash steal good things they do. So I think there's some like physical skills that I'm good or that I'm maybe above average at, but I think that it's more the dedication or obsession, some people would maybe say, of it than it is any like I'm pretty fast. I'm pretty good at using both hands. Like I mentioned that as being but
Right.
I I think those were some of that was learned or trained, like because I've drilled
Right.
so much and I've sparred so much, I've got improved those already natural abilities. So um, that's what I think.
I think that's a good answer. I think that makes sense. Like that's a lot of work. That's a lot of dedication, a lot of work, and paid off. It's really good.
So play this. Yeah, you see in this fight, I'm doing more of the kind of not letting. Rowan is also very fast, like Tora, and so I did not want her to set up at her range. So I was trying to keep her off balance a little bit.
how do you adjust during a fight? Like, I guess speaking of personal experience, I have a hard time not overthinking it if I try to adjust in the middle of a fight.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the $1,000,000 question, I think, because if you're thinking too much, you're just gonna die because you're thinking, and thinking is slow, right? So
Mhm.
you kind of have to say, like right here where we're out of range, you kind of have to say, okay, I kind of think this, like here's my tactics for the fight, and then I'm just going to kind of go with them. And then when we're fighting, it's just going to have to be all instinctual. Because if I'm thinking too consciously about it, like I said, it's too slow. So I kind of have to like think about it and then let it go subconscious. Um,
Love it. Yeah.
and I think that's difficult to do. And I think, but I know I remember thinking in this fight after that double kill that I didn't that Rowan had a longer sword than me and that she's fast, and so I didn't want to just let her set to her to where she was gonna move, like she could disengage my sword dagger and hit me, or hit me with a really long explosive attack, and so I wanted to be more careful about when I picked my spot, and so I needed to be more patient and not let her set, and then I kind of was like, okay, I have that, go, and then it's
Mhm.
kind of more like some people will say like it kind of like it's not really flow because it wasn't like fighting super well exactly, but it's like still mind, I think is what some
Yeah.
people say, where it's
Yeah.
like, okay, I've sort of let it sink in, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you think all those things and you go and then you just do the same stupid thing you were
Do what
doing
you're gonna
before.
do.
But
It's usually what happens to me is I think about it and go, yeah, and then fucking forget all of it
yeah,
instantly. It's
yeah, and I think a lot of less people, like I think there's a lot less adjustments that happen than people say. I think a lot of people
oh,
kind of
huh.
make stuff up. Um, but I think in this case, I did adjusted slash just kind of woke up. It was like, oh, this is how I should have
Yeah,
been fighting. Why did I kind of was asleep in the first pass? But
that also just help with like that initial loss can sometimes jar you. I would
I'm
point out
also
that pretty much all of your greatest hits at some point said that they adjusted in the fight. Like all of them said it.
well, and they might be the ones who are adjusting because they are very good.
Yeah.
Um, I don't. They might not be adjusting quite as much as they say, um, but they are probably the ones who are adjusting. I think it's more like there's like some mid-level fighter who says he adjusts, and it's like, well, okay, you maybe a little bit, but not as much as you think, or it wasn't as relevant as you think it was,
Yeah.
because
It's kind of retrospective.
yeah, exactly. You kind of stumbled into something and you're like, oh, this worked, and then you say you made an adjustment. It's like, well, no, you got lucky a little bit, which is fine. We all get lucky, and then we
Yeah.
try to if
We
we
don't want to play on luck.
no. Um, yeah, so like I'm definitely giving Rowan more space here as she comes in.
Right. Which would play to a weakness of mine because I'm still in a similar boat to old you where I'm really impatient
Yeah.
and easy to draw in.
Whoops. I want to go back to that. Um,
Mm.
I had like one last point about this. If the video will load, come on.
I know. Never
Yeah.
loads when you need it.
So
That
I
was
used
nice.
yeah. So no, it's playing it here. Come on. I don't know why this isn't working.
Just might be sticking a little bit because of Zoom and stuff.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. Yeah. So I had been retreating. And now I'm a little more still here. So yeah, Rowan comes in a little. I retreat. Then I kind of come back. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're playing the range here, but yeah, right there, and I get a little
Oh,
lucky, I'll be
yeah.
honest, because I kind of miss her sword a little bit, but I get the range. Here's the range I like, right? It's kind of what I was looking
Mm-hmm.
for earlier in the fight.
And then you use it as soon as you got it.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, there's a little bit of luck here because her sword goes past my head because my dagger parried in the wrong direction, but I kind of duck in a little bit. So the range was good, dagger not so good. Um, I think I did adjust, but I think I was a little bit of luck, and so I don't like that, but not bad.
something that you did with your dagger that I did not do, that was a good adjustment for this type of fight, was it looked like you rotated your dagger almost like up, like you basically made you're kind of tipping your whole body to your right a little bit.
Mhm.
It puts your dagger in even more of an aggressive place. I'm still really upright.
Yeah. Well, I talked about that earlier, right? Trying
It's
to
even harder.
keep more of the guard in front of the blade rather than the blade in front of the blade. It kind of helps
Mhm.
defend, helps a little bit. The other thing I did actually, you can see this earlier, different points in this fight, not right here. There's different points where I think I bring my sword hand out a little bit to try to control the space. But this is not the right, I'm not doing it right now in this video, but there was earlier where I was, and it's not much, it's like a few inches out, just because your blade is, you have that lighter blade, and so you're kind of disengaging it. So I was like, I wanted to put a little bit of more defense in front of it. And so I kind of broke one of my own rules by bringing my sword more forward. But that's kind of part of it, is you learn, you know when to bend the rules or even break them.
That's part of being good. Being a great insect. The next one that was about to come up is you and Adam.
Yeah, we can watch that. And this is an older video from 2015. So
2015.
I kind of think that you can see here how my dagger is very flat. And I talked about how I'd adjust it with the point up. So this is before I made that adjustment. So it's not as good. And then I'm a little, I think I'm a little stiffer in my motions all around. Not as fluid.
Pretty nervous, but likely as well.
Yeah, this is the final. Yeah, it's actually kind of painful for me to watch because I feel like I fight so much better now.
That's all right. I feel the pain. It's a good pain. It's a growing pain. So now that we're watching you be less good, what do you feel like is your weakness? What's the secret to beating you?
I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but I still am impatient sometimes. So if you can keep range and kind of run me around a field long enough, I will probably make a stupid mistake and overextend. And if you can get me to do that, that's your opportunity. I'm better about it than I used to be, but it's still weakness. So yeah, getting me to overextend is really the key to it, because if I'm not, like, sometimes if the fight takes longer than a minute, I start to get like antsy. Like, why is this fight not over? Why am I still here? And it's it's partially an ego thing too, where I'm like, no, I should have won by now. And so if you can make the fight last longer and get me to reach in my lunge, you can definitely hit me. I'm vulnerable there. Or get me to reach, or if you figure out what shot I'm gonna throw, like, so if you know that I want to throw, like, a headshot is one of my favorite shots. If you know I'm gonna throw that shot, and you're just ready to block and counter, I think that's a little riskier because than just like using range to bait me out. But if you can get me to, if you know what shot I'm going to throw and you step in right as I throw it, that could work. Yeah, but generally get me impatient is the key, I think. I think some people think that they could like rush me out of the gate because they're like, well, I'm not going to let him like dictate the fight. And I think that can work, but I think generally that's a huge gamble, and I think I'm usually pretty good at dealing with people who just want to like charge in, because I like to be an aggressive fighter. So it's like, yeah, sure, come on. And so I think that's something that people think
they're kind of just doing the work for you.
I don't think that is a good idea. I think it's usually the opposite. Be super patient, make the fight really boring, draw it out, make me come to you. That would be the way to do it. I mean, you have fought me a bunch. What do you think?
Just be faster than you. It's not true.
Faster, tall,
fight like Mike.
Fight like Mike. Yeah, fighting like Mike's a good idea, actually.
It's like, it's all fucking bullshit, isn't it? I tend to not strategize before a fight, so I'm not a good person to ask about that. I have one more question, then we can go to participant questions, see what everyone has to say. But in general, having done several of these interviews any consistent behaviors and thought processes and kind of ways of being that really good fencers have and that you'd like to see more people have?
Well, that's a great question. I think in general, the really good fencers have a really healthy respect for their opponent's sword. Is in they know that that's what loses them the fight, and so they approach the fight in a very careful way. Even if they're very aggressive about it, it's always about controlling the other person's weapon. And I think that's been consistent. I think everyone who's been on so far has a system. We talked about that earlier, that they teach. They're like very systematic in their approach, and they know how to deal with any situation because they faced it before and they've developed a system, or they've learned the system from a period manual, one or the other. And so, and I think so. I think more people could be systematic with their fencing and not rely on luck. And I think more people could, and that's kind of that kind of dovetails really into the thing about like you can't just like throw your shot. You have to account for your opponent's weapon. If you're not doing that,
Yeah.
then it's just luck, or you're getting lucky, and you're probably like, maybe you are gonna win. Maybe you have a technique that you do that wins you 51% of your fights, but is that really how you want? But it's a random 51%, right? You're gonna win, like you're gonna beat some people you shouldn't, and lose to some people that you shouldn't, and that's
just not
good.
Not a good track record.
Yeah. So being systematic, being careful, even if they're being careful in their aggression, and then they tend to view their fencing, the result of their fencing, as an external thing rather than something that impacts them morally, right? So if I lose a tournament, I don't say, and this is true for all the good fencers, they don't say, oh, I'm a horrible person because I lost this fight. They say, oh, my parry was in the wrong place. I need to fix that.
Mhm.
And so it can still be super, super frustrating to lose, especially for the good fighters, because like I think the good fighters hate to lose more than anyone, but they know they know that it's not like, they don't like, you have to not take it so personally. It's just a failing of your fencing, not of you. You're still a good person
Yeah.
if you
It's
lost at
something you can
fencing.
improve too. It's like
Improve, yeah,
controllable.
controllable. And I think
Exciting.
the the agency to control the outcome of the fight is something that the people on this have. They haven't said it that way, but they've expressed that in like if you listen to what they're saying, they're like, yeah, you can get better, you can improve your parries. It's not just, it's, and that's something that all successful people in all avenues have. And
That's a good point.
to answer a question that you didn't ask, or you kind of asked, if there was one thing I was going to teach that I wanted every fencer in the SCA to learn, it's not, to improve their footwork or whatever. It's to not take losing so personally. It's like, or criticism so personally. If someone comes and says, man, your parry's bad, and you like, makes you feel like you need to look at that objectively and say, okay, my parry's bad, that's no big deal, I'm going to make it better. And
Yeah.
if you could do that, you can be a good fencer, or you can be
It
really good
also
at
helped you
anything.
learn.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so that's probably my biggest pet peeve. People need to take things like is objective. It's just a critique of your fencing. It's not a moral judgment on you as a person. If you fought badly, or someone told you something about your fighting was not good.
It's also like, I mean, this is my own personal experience. Actually, I'm gonna open it up to if anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute and ask away.
I'll go
While
ahead and
people are doing that,
stop sharing then.
perfect. That works.
And
The it's a double-edged sword as far as your teacher will have a harder time teaching you if you're taking criticism really personally. Like I had somebody I was trying to teach, and every time I worked with him, it was like I was insulting him, like I was insulting his intelligence or his personal being when I was trying to say, like, hey, you need to lunge better. Like, and it made it really discouraging to work with him.
yeah, no, it's a super good point, because it's true. Like, I mean, I've taught you a ton, right? And if I said your parry was bad, you would be like, okay, how do I make it better? Not, oh man, you're so mean for telling me that my parry was bad.
Dude, the best compliment you ever gave me, first compliment was now I have to kind of work to kill you. So
It's a good compliment.
Yeah, it's a good compliment.
Pretty arrogant compliment, but it's still a compliment.
Normal.
So
yeah. Is there anything we didn't touch on that you wanted to speak to?
Someone asked a question a while ago. They said, do you find that adjusting to dagger positions decrease hand picking? Yes.
Is there a chat that I'm not seeing that? Uh-oh. I only got one chat earlier.
I have two. It does a little bit because it keeps my, well, it depends on, your dagger position has to be informed by the guard your dagger is on. So like the way I'm holding my dagger does not work as well if you just have a ring dagger, because I'm putting more of my, like if this is like, I'm putting more of my hand here, right? So there's just a ring here. It kind of leaves all this part of my hand open. So with the ring dagger, you kind of have to point your dagger a little bit more, which part of the reason I don't like ring daggers as much. But with a shell or like any type of, with a more of a guard, you can have the point a little higher and your hand is still safe under here. It also does prevent, because I used to sometimes get people, like if my dagger is very pointed, they could sometimes, even if there's a guard over here, they can kind of hit here right into your thumb, right at the base of your thumb. And so if I'm holding it right, that kind of prevents, oh, it's because they messaged me privately. That's why you couldn't see the question. I hope you wrote okay with that question being asked publicly, Robert, but yeah, that yeah, and honestly, it's something that one of my students used to, we called it snaking the dagger, which is, I don't know why we called it that, but it's when you point your dagger too much and it kind of presents that that right here at the base of your thumb that you can hit really easily if they do that.
Makes sense.
He doesn't do that as much anymore though, which is good. But we used to be able to take his hand at will because he would not hold his dagger right. I mean, your dagger hand's always going to be open. The key is you have to learn to make on the fly adjustments.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious because I know that when you first started, everybody would peck at your dagger hand, and if that made some of that go away, thus also freeing you up to be able to focus more on what you were wanting to do, while they were still trying to figure out a way to try to get to your hand.
That might have been why I adjusted it. I'm not 100% sure. It was one of those things, because I watched so much video of myself, right, that I just kind of saw them myself doing and was like, oh, this works better. I'm going to keep doing it. But it does seem to keep my hand more safe.
Which then allows you to spend more time focusing on your offense.
Exactly, yeah. But I do think, I think of it, I really think the bigger benefit is putting the back half of the dagger blade in front of using that to defend more than the tip of the dagger. Like, I think that's really the bigger benefit. And I think the hand protection is kind of a side benefit. At least that's how I look at it. But yeah, I mean, it's not an adjustment that Mike made quite as much, I don't think. I think he keeps his dagger still a little more pointed than me. Now that I think about it.
But he moves it differently.
Yeah.
Like it's a softer movement. Yours is very sharp.
Yeah. And I know Rowan. Sorry, go ahead, Robert.
That would also be with Mike being taller than you. I mean, plain and simple, you're flying it on a lower plane.
Yeah,
if you
that's
fly
a good point.
Flat, anybody that's taller than you, and there's a fair number of them.
Most people, yeah.
They're already going to have, if you're flying it flat, they're already going to have a natural disposition to want to shoot at your hand because they are above it.
Yeah, they're looking down onto it, yeah. Though Miles is the person he used to hold it too flat, and he would be the person I could always stab his hand, and he is definitely taller than me, but that might have just been inexperience on his end, not so much.
And Miles is going to hear about this and specifically look to set you up by doing that.
Hopefully. Yeah. No, but I think the dagger adjustment, I feel it has helped my game quite a bit. I think it's a small adjustment, but I can kind of see in my videos where when it adjusted, and like it was a jump in my fight.
I mean,
And
as long
plain and
as you
simple, it's
talk,
more comfortable.
Yeah.
yeah, true.
What was that, Rowan?
Plain and
hope you
simple, it's also more comfortable.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely.
Something else, and another big jump in your fight that I think we all saw a while ago was that kind of accidental stutter step where you're half, I think Mike did it first. You lunge, your heel brushes the ground, you continue.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I don't know if you want to talk more about that, because from what I remember, it was accidental, but maybe you did train it in.
I don't remember if I saw on a video of someone else doing it, or if someone actually taught it to me. And then I worked it, Mike and I think Mike worked it in kind of just naturally because he did that. And to be clear about what we're talking about, it's when you fake at just a normal advanced step, but instead of just stepping, you let your heel tap, and then you lunge off of that. So your foot never really comes all the way down. And I've seen a good number of good fighters do it. I've seen Connor Livingston from Atlantia do it. Mike does it. I do it sometimes. And I can't remember. Connor might have taught it to me at one point way back. Or I just saw him do it and I thought it looked cool and I stole it. I can't remember.
Yeah.
I genuinely can't remember.
Seems like the type of thing where you'd see it in a video rather than it really being taught, because it's tough to explain.
Yeah. And I do go over that if you wanna know more about that technique. I do go over that in more detail in my video about why Miguel is better than you. It's one of the techniques that he does that I highlight in that video. So if you want to see more of that, you can go watch that.
It's this most controversial video. Except no, Time of the Hand is probably
Time
worse.
of the Hand is way more controversial.
Oh, I'm so sorry. It's just the most clickbaity title, I suppose.
Yeah. Anyone else have anything?
Also, this whole playlist that we were just going through will be posted, so you can go through any videos that you wanted to see in greater depth, whatever.
If that's it, we can stop the recording and we can still chat a little bit if anyone wants to chat. So,
Okie dokie.
yeah, thanks everyone for coming. Thanks, Rowan, for interviewing me instead. Next month, I'm going to interview Master Boomy from Atlantia.
Cool.
So yeah, stay tuned for that, like for when I post about that. So it's good seeing everyone.